Okay, welcome back to Fast Jet Performance then. My name is Tim Davies, and as you can see, we are back in the attack shack where I am dropping truth bombs on your personal battlefields, helping you to win the wars you are fighting. I've got an email coming from a young dude, needs some help, and we're going to talk about that a little bit today. Now, I realise your time is important. Let's limit this. I will just bounce in and out of this really quickly. We'll get it done hopefully about 8 to 12 minutes. Okay, the email that's come in then is from a young guy called Joe. I'm going to go through the email quickly, and then the things I'm going to talk to you about from the email are why it's important not to multiply by zero. It's a very common thing I see happening a lot. I'll explain what that means, and then I'll talk a little bit about a famous tennis player and how she became a worldwide sensation and a champion, and what that means, how we can apply that to ourselves. It's not actually that difficult. I'll then talk about the attributes of a fast jet pilot that will help this young guy out. I'll tell you my story about how I got into jets. I'll be really brief with that. We'll have a little bit about consistency, which I think is immensely important and very, very underrated. I'll talk a little bit about my school, and then we'll finish it, lads and ladettes. Let's not get flashed up. Right, okay, let's go then, guys. So the email's come in then from a guy called Jay. I'm going to read the email real quick, and then we'll just have a chat. Hello, Tim. I hope this finds you well. I've been watching your videos for quite a while now and find them very inspirational. I'm a 26-year-old. The age is important, so remember that. I'm a 26-year-old guy who wants to apply to be a pilot in the Royal Navy, hopefully fast jets. I've spoken with the careers office about my chances of getting in, as I'm a bit older, and they've said it's very slim due to the popularity of the course and the 1 year turnaround. Now, the 1 year turnaround is because when you apply, there's things you've got to go through, aptitude tests, medicals, interviews. It takes about a year before you'd actually enter, in this case, Dartmouth, Britannia Royal Naval College up here, or Cranwell or Sandhurst. I have all the GCSE grades required, some UCAS points, some A-levels. I think A-levels give you points now, not too sure. Willing to get more online if required, and I've received a 2-1 from my university course. And now I'm older, I'm aware that I'm more switched on than I realised from when I've sent an application for the Royal Navy role, and it's been my dream since a child to become one. I just didn't have the self-belief when I was younger. Is there anything I can do to convince them to let me train at 26? I would do it for free if possible. Appreciate your advice, wisdom, etc., etc. Joe, fair play to the guy. He's written me in, so he's done well there. The other thing I would say, guys, is my PA shifts a lot of these emails out of the way. She does it because I am overloaded. If you come into my school, it's $10 a month. I answer all these questions real time like this with you in my office, one-to-one. It's a much better way of doing it. It'll cost you $10. Yeah, whatever. Sorry about that, guys. I just don't have the time otherwise, you know what I mean? Let's talk about Joe's email right now. I've got a few notes. The first thing I want to just say is 26 is the upper age limit for the Royal Navy. 26, I think, is their cutoff for pilot. I think in the Royal Air Force it's 23 and a half. I might be mistaken. Army will have some different things. So what Joe's doing here is applying at the back end, at the very back end. He's got no wiggle room. If he was to fail, he will never be able to reapply again. So when the Navy or the Army or the Air Force look at you when you're applying, they will look at someone who's 26 and they will say, well, if he applies and he comes and does the Admiralty interview board at, I think it's Salton down in Gosport, and he fails that, he won't get another chance because he's over age. Whereas if we had an 18-year-old come, or someone younger than 26, and they fail, which the majority of people do, they fail the first time, I failed the first time, got in on the second time, then at least they've got some age, they've got some capacity to come back again. One thing I would say, guys, this next bit's quite important actually. If you've got a young person, maybe from the ages of 10, my nephew's 10, well, all the way up to 26, this video is actually quite important for them, and I'm going to talk about something about consistency, hard work, motivation, dedication, and just the grind and the grift. And it might be applicable for people that are quite young. And I am talking, as I said, early teens, maybe even younger. So we've got this email, we've got this problem then. The guy's at the back end, he's saying, shall I still apply? Yes, apply, but you've got to look elsewhere, because I would say there's 99.9% chance you're going to bounce off that application. What that means is they're not going to accept it. Or they may accept you in if for some reason you've got some great grades or you've done some extra stuff. But chances are there's guys that are younger than you, girls that are younger than you, that just can give more to the Navy than you can. They've just got more time. And also, I would just say here, you have multiplied by zero. And what I mean that, Joe, is that you've done everything you possibly can to get in, except for one thing, and that one thing is a big fat zero. And when you've done everything else, and you've gone that plus that plus that plus that plus that equals a certain amount, and you multiply it by everything, and you come out with this 0 and you multiply it by that, and everything multiplied by 0 of course goes to 0, doesn't it? Fine. So we're going to talk a little bit about that because I don't want this to go on too long. There was a tennis player called Steffi Graf back in the day. Now, I'm not even too sure this was Steffi Graf, but when I was younger I used to watch these men and women play, and I remember this story about a woman tennis player, female tennis player. Now, it may have been Steffi, it may have been someone else, but it was someone that was doing a training academy in Florida at the time, I believe. Now, the trainers, the coaches, and everyone else who were training all these young people, all these young, up-and-coming tennis stars of the future, they were trying to work out who they were going to put forwards and train more and just really try and push them for greatness and stardom. And one of them, apparently, was Steffi Graf. Now, it may not have been her, but let's just pretend it was. And they applied these 2 metrics to all the tennis players. The first one was their talent, their ability. Just how good they actually were. These people were 14, 15, 16, 17, 18 years old. How good were they as tennis players at this precise moment in time? That was the first metric. And the second metric was, what is their willingness to train? How focused and dedicated are they at getting up in the morning, going to the tennis courts and smashing balls all day? Now, they took a score from each one. Let's pretend they're out of 10. I have no idea. They'll say this player, raw talent, is definitely an 8. They are up there. We can work with this person. Willingness to train, 6, 7. All right, let's multiply that by that. We'll get a figure. Okay, cool. We've got a figure. All right, now we know a figure. We can put them on a chart. That person is on a chart. We've got a figure. They did it with a few more people, and eventually they came to Steffi Graf. And Steffi is renowned for this, by the way. That's why she was world champion, everything else, okay? Over 100 singles victories and some other things. I'm not really too sure. I don't follow it myself. However, and they said, well, how talented is this woman playing tennis? And everyone in the room turned around and said, she's a 10. Oh yeah, okay, she's a 10. And then they said, well, how willing is she to train? Everyone looked around in the room and they came back. She was a 10. And this is really, 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 really rare. It doesn't really happen like that. This woman would be up early morning. She'd be out there before anyone else. She'd be smashing balls across the court. She'd be the last one on the court, last one to finish. The kind of Lewis Hamilton mentality. Lewis is the first in, he is the last out. He's a massive, massive guy to put in that work. And if he loses anything in talent, he makes up for it in his willingness to train. The same thing, if Max has a great deal of talent, maybe Max doesn't actually maybe train as much. And we get this kind of ebb and flow, but they equal each other out, and that's what makes competition great. Whereas Steffi had a 10 and a 10. Imagine if Steffi didn't have a 10 and a 10. Imagine if Steffi's talent was like she has no talent at all, but she's really, really willing. Well, okay, let's multiply that 0 by a 10, shall we? What do you get? What do you get when you multiply something by 0? You get 0. But the other way around. Steffi was the most talented player in the world. She's a 10. But is she willing to train? Never gets out of bed. No, never get her on the court. It's a 0. Her score is a 0. What Joe's done here is he's taken the attributes of a fast jet pilot and he's multiplied everything he's done by a 0. And I'm going to explain that right now. Let's look at the attributes of a fast jet pilot as I see it. I trained people for 10 years, guys. I was a jet mate for 20 years, just over 20 years in total. We'll talk a little bit about myself and my own journey, just because I think it will help young people in a minute, if I can do that. And so, attributes of a fast jet pilot then, they've got to be good at mental arithmetic, they've got to be good at a bit of conversation, presentation maybe, because you will present to people that you're flying with all the time. You've got to be a little bit well read in current affairs. You know, I would suggest getting 2 newspapers before you go to interview. Probably the Telegraph is a bit right, isn't it? The Guardian is a bit left, and therefore you're getting a bit of both. And read them in the 3 months leading up to your, read them once or twice a week, that's enough, leading up to your interviews. Fitness. Yeah, you should be hitting the gym a little bit. You want to be a little bit fit. Flying jets is not easy, and fit body, fit mind. Diet, have some knowledge about that. Don't rock up their overweight. They don't want to see that. They want just you to have a knowledge about, it's self-discipline, isn't it? Okay, just make sure you look like you're a little bit disciplined. Service knowledge. You may know a lot about, say, they may ask you a question in an interview. Tell me about Johnny Johnson. Know a little bit about some people that I would say were kind of heroes within the service you're trying to join. The process, know about the process. What do? I go to Average Interviews Board. I do the board there. Then we go into Dartmouth and we do this training. Then I do initial C training, and then I do some fleet time, if that's still a thing. And then I go into flying training. And then, you want to know where you're going to train. They want to know you've invested in it. Air Cadets, you may well have done that. Scouts, you may well have been in there. Officer Training Corps, University Air Squadron, University Royal Naval Unit, University. And the last one, I would say, you need to be the correct age. Joe may have done all these things. He may be the gift of all things that are. Mental arithmetic. He may well be very read in current affairs. fitness, he's knowledgeable on that. Diet is great. He's got great service knowledge. He's read everything. He may have done air cadets. He may have been a scout. He may well have done officer training corps at university. All these things where the Air Force will look and go, willingness to train, top, mate. You know what I mean? Brilliant. He's brilliant. He's enthusiastic. He's got everything. He's obviously a talented guy. He's great. How old is he? 26. All those things I've just said, let's say out of 10, you've got mental arithmetic, you've got 7, you've got times 6, you've got blah, blah, blah. You've got this big figure, like, you've got 107 times, how old is he? He's over the age limit, or he's knocking on the end of it, 0. Everything equals 0. That's what zeroing out's being called. Don't multiply by 0, okay? So you can't wake up when you're 26 and go, you know what, I'd like to be a jet pilot. I wanted to be a jet pilot when I was 10. Now, when I was 10 years old, I know exactly when it started. I was in a petrol station outside the French city of Saint-Mère-Église with my father. He just filled up his motorcycle. I was rolling around on half tracks and Willys MB Jeeps and everything because my dad ran a group called the Military Vehicle Trust. I think he was the secretary. He took vehicles into France every year, and this was 1984. I was 10, and in front of us, when he was paying, he said, hey, do you want a present? I said, I'll have a present, Dad. What's going on? He said, why don't you get this plastic set of screwdrivers, and therefore I can help him fix his BSA M20 Royal Marines motorcycle that he was riding around on from 1940, whatever it was. I looked at it, it was plastic, and next to it was a paper set of an airfield with commercial airliners and everything else, and it was paper. And I said, I don't want the screwdrivers, I want the aeroplanes. And he looked a bit disappointed and he said, well, but you could help fix my motorcycle. And I said, yeah, but aeroplanes. And he got me the aeroplanes instead, and I played with aeroplanes the whole time on the way home. I was 10 years old. From then on, I was hooked. I made models. I know exactly what models. I made a Spitfire. I made an A7 Corsair 2, I think it was at the time. I made lots of hanging them from the ceiling. I joined the Air Cadets. I did Morse code. I was a radio operator. I was a shooter, marksman was what I got to sergeant. I then went into the officer training corps. I did Cambrian patrol, long range reconnaissance patrol competitions. I did all this stuff. And so when it came time then, I did a Royal Air Force flying scholarship. When it came time to apply to the military, they looked at me and went, this guy's already done. Like, this guy, he knows everything already. You know what I mean? And I failed my first one because I knew a lot about the Air Force, but I applied to the Navy, and then the Navy said, we get it, dude, you're just not much of a team player, you know what I'm saying? So they booted me out. I didn't pass my Aberdeen interview board. I then went, how am I going to improve as a team player? I lived in Portsmouth. I joined Portsmouth rugby team. Hadn't played much rugby before. Went back to them after 6 months with all these different things I'd done. I got in and I flew jets for 20 years in the Navy and in the Air Force. Do you see what I'm saying? Nothing I had done multiplied by 0. There was no 0 in my life. There was no 0. There was only pluses. I wasn't 10 out of 10 academic. I wasn't 10 out of 10 on how I presented. Look at me now. I'm not the most gifted guy in the world when it comes in front of a camera. I wasn't 10 out of 10 on my diet or my fitness. I was in the middle somewhere, but I didn't have a 0 in there. There was no 0. And in today's world, we've got to be generalists. We've got to be a little bit knowledgeable about everything. Just a little tiny weeny bit. We cannot go forward if we are multiplying by 0. The last thing I'll tell you about, guys, because I'll leave the video at 15 minutes here, I want you to think about people in F1. Formula 1 is a sport I follow. The one thing the champions have is a consistency. If you speak to Lewis, the one thing he knows a lot about is driving cars. In fact, if you speak to these people, apparently they're quite dull. And the reason they're dull is because they know a lot about what they do. Consistency. Every single day they're doing the same thing to the point that you and I would be bored of it. We'd be dumb. And that's what makes the difference between champions and people like us. Every day from the age of 10, I was interested in flying jets. I was reading about it. I was watching TV programs. I was going to air shows. Every single day I was doing something. It was in my life. Everything was my life. I didn't turn around when I was 26 and decide I wanted to do it now. That's not good enough because it's a battle. It's a competition. To fly jets, to do anything like that is a competition. You're competing with guys who've been in scouts. I get guys writing to me saying, hey Tim, I'm a warrant officer in the Air Cadets. I've done this charity. I've got these. And I'm looking at these guys going, geez, you've done 3 times the amount I ever did. You know what I'm saying? So you cannot just rock up at the upper age limit and decide that today you want to fly jets. I knew no one in the military that was like that, like 0 in the military, like that. Everyone in the military had some background. My school, we talk about this kind of stuff all the time. And there is another course starting, okay, in about a week's time, 29th of May, I think it is, and that's the Primo course from the beginning. You can join any time. If you join at the beginning of the Primo, which is learning to fly like we taught on these airplanes, no experience necessary. I will set you up personally. A great team in there will help you up. Join into Primo. As I said, if you want to do experiential, just use the 2 servers, which are massively built, a whole world of range complexes, airfields, everything. $10 a month on the Experiencia. If you want to join the Discipulus and get the full teaching from me, where we talk about this stuff the whole time, like the whole time, okay, then that is a bit more expensive. I think it's £40. It's the same as my gym membership, my local gym membership. I keep it the same. Just to finish, if you are a young guy and you're like you're 10, 12, 15, or you're a woman that's looking at doing something in the future, I would just say start doing stuff towards it now. 10 isn't too early to start doing things. It really isn't, okay? But make sure you're doing something towards it the whole time, and I think you'd be okay. Guys, look, I really appreciate it. It's a quick video. I hope it kind of resonates with some people. Really appreciate Tim Davies' Fast Ship Performance.